Hello, I'm Sue Stockdale. Welcome to Series 20 of the Access to Inspiration podcast. I'm delighted to speak today to Jayshree Seth. She is the Chief Science Advocate for 3M. And in our conversation, she explains her approach to problem solving using a mosaic building process, how she thinks about artificial intelligence as artificial diligence, and also she explained how 3M foster innovation. I'm sure you will find what she has to say enlightening and thought-provoking, particularly if you want to encourage people to be more innovative. And you can read a transcription of this episode as you listen along on our website at accesstoinspiration.org. Welcome to the podcast, Jayshree. It's lovely to speak to you today.
Thank you so much, Sue. Appreciate you having me.
Well, it's lovely to get into understanding your background and experience and what makes you an advocate for science. How do your early experiences as a youngster really shape who you are and what you're doing today, Jayshree?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually grew up in India, and I grew up on the campus of an engineering institution. My dad was a university professor. I was surrounded by STEM professionals. I must say, though, I really didn't understand what it is they did, because when I was strongly encouraged to go into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and specifically engineering, because that was an engineering institution, I was like, but I'm not that science type. I'm not that person who wants to break apart toys and understand how they work. So I had this stereotypical image of what a STEM professional or what an engineer does. And I just didn't see myself in that. So that was interesting growing up on that campus and being encouraged. I should mention that my early childhood was in England, and my dad had gone to do his PhD there. And for my young parents, navigating a new land, a new language, new culture, all of that definitely shaped how we grew up, because they figured out what it is that want to retain and what it is they want to adopt and adapt to and things like that. So as a young family, certainly felt at times that we were slightly different in terms of how we operated and what we believed in and what we did. So I would say those two things. Plus, I would say growing up in a wonderful, wonderful town with just a highly academic focus because it was a university town, I think that has also shaped my journey. And just surrounded by people who were into teaching because it was all the professors and their families and stuff like that. I do know it's difficult to create that outside, but I value that nonetheless as to how that sense of community comes about when people are all driven by common objectives. And I try to sort of imbibe that in the things that I do.
In what you said there, I sense curiosity was also a part of that experience for both your parents and for you, Jayshree. And you've spoken about that in your TEDx talk as well, about the power of curiosity and how it was quite a driving force in your life. Where has it taken you?
To me, the reason why I don't lead with the word curiosity is because one of the ways people think about curiosity is the what is this and how does it work and all of that. And for me, it's what can I learn more about this? That's been the driving force. And so it's a shade of curiosity, which is, I would like to think of as more holistic than the mechanics of things. And had I known that both of them are equally important in scientific fields, I perhaps would not have thought of myself as not the science type, because I am curious about learning. I am curious about why things are the way they are. What can you learn about it? Who are the people involved? What shapes their opinions? So it's very focused on that. And I think it has really served me in good stead in life and career in my professional journey, because it's always about learning. So if the curiosity is about learning, any kind of learning, whether it is the mechanistic aspect of how things work versus the holistic aspect of why things are the way they are, they both are extremely important. And that has definitely been a thread through my journey.
So, what inspired you then to transition from being a scientist that was focused on patents and innovation to a broader role as an advocate for science?
That's an interesting question, and I can't take credit for it, because I was asked to take on this new role that was created called Chief Science Advocate. And I was like, what is this role? Because if you Google, it doesn't exist anywhere, right? And then I found out that they had actually done a survey, unbeknownst to me, to understand the public perception of science. And what they found is, after surveying 14 countries, 1,000 respondents per country, 4 out of 10 said if science didn't exist, their lives would be no different.
Wow.
Wow, it is. And I was like, what? And they said, wait, 30% of the people call themselves science skeptics. And in this population, 6 out of 10 said if science didn't exist, their lives would be no different. So that's when you realize that, oh, because you're steeped in science, you're doing it every day, you understand the role, you appreciate it. But then you realize, wait a minute, they were taking the survey on their laptops and mobile phones. So they really don't understand that it's science that has afforded them these gadgets and gizmos, that it is scientific research and decades of scientific research that gives you this application and this innovation that you hold. So it is our problem that we have been okay with science being in the background, underappreciated, and taken for granted. And that is why I was like, okay, now I see what the point is. And I took on this role of chief science advocate. So this is more about raising awareness and appreciation and acknowledgement of science and moving people from the apathy that they might feel. It's also about breaking down barriers and biases and boundaries and beliefs like, oh, I'm a girl, science is not for me, or I have to be a genius to be a scientist, or left brain, right brain, or whatever. It's about breaking those down. And C is about communication, communication, communication with a context that people can see and appreciate that science can help solve problems and scientists can help improve lives. So that is what I talk about actually also in my TEDx talk that you referenced. So if you would put the link in the show notes, that would be great for people to understand how I finally said yes to this role, what was my hesitation, and why sometimes just exploring new areas can just open up your eyes, and then your entire career is examined through this lens and you take on this new role with such vigor.
It must have been very exciting for you to take this role, and I can hear the passion in your voice as you're talking about it, Jayshree. Why do you think it is that for some people they don't think science is viewed as valuable or useful, as was found in the survey?
Yeah, I think the connection is just not made. The connection is just not made. We cannot assume that people make the connection of science. You know, it's funny, Sue. It was my daughter who pointed it out to me when she was very young. She says, Mommy, why don't you understand? Art is a subject in school, and science is a subject in school. Nobody tells you, you should appreciate art. You must do this. And then suddenly people are like, you should appreciate science. You must follow science. Don't you see how that works for many people who did not pursue science and they were just two subjects? And I was like, oh my gosh, there's an element of something you said that is so right. So now, if we're going to tell people it is important and you should know this or that, you have to make the connection for them and say why it is important. So I think that's just it. Making that connection is so important. And it's not that you're always talking to a peer group and your own scientist community. You're talking to the public and you have to contextualize it that way.
Thank goodness for children coming up with these observations sometimes that us adults don't notice in quite the same way.
Totally telling me exactly what the problem is and how to solve it.
Well, that makes a lovely segue into my next question to you, Jayshree, which is really about what makes an interesting problem for you. The company you're in, 3M, it's all about problem solving and innovation. What makes it interesting from a problem perspective for you?
I do what I think is an interesting process. I call it the process of mosaic building. So it's the idea of collecting tiles because I think no problem offers itself as a puzzle. Everything fits exactly so. I like the organic visualization of a mosaic, which is just a bunch of tiles and you can form many different things. And once I collect those tiles, questions start emerging. Why don't we do this? It's like, okay, why don't we? Because that seems like a great idea, knowing what I know from trends and consumer needs and business perspective and technology evolution and products in the market. Why don't we do this? And that leads me to limitations. And that's what I like, finding the limitation that is stopping a particular product offering or an innovation or a technology. It's like, what is that building block that is needed so that we can make that happen? And once I have that mosaic, once we have looked at it, the compelling narrative has emerged, the limitation is clear, then I like to collaborate with a whole bunch of people to actually start solving that problem. But it is what limitations are what drive me. So I am different in a certain way that I'm not an expert in one area. I like to identify the problem to solve. And so it's very important to build that mosaic and that compelling narrative of why we want to solve this problem and find the limitations that need that technology building block that we can then develop to facilitate this new innovation.
And have you got any practical examples of how that's worked?
I have examples of getting things off the ground because we built that mosaic, but it led us completely different place than what we would have envisioned. But I still say it was important to get going. I have examples where we did everything right, but it was not a success in the marketplace because something happened, or others where we weren't even able to bring it to the market because some things changed. And the reason why I talk about everything is because nobody knows how to pick winners. I don't care who says what. The main thing is you've got to do a lot of these things and learn from them. And so learning is the critical piece of making this happen. Now, most of the stuff that I work on is highly proprietary, so I don't want to get into the details of that. And the details may not be interesting, but really what is interesting is the fact that despite pulling it all, you may not have the right answer. Despite pulling it all, you may start there but end somewhere else. Despite pulling it all, you may have wild success or you may have a failure. The important thing is it was still extremely important in that moment in time to pull together this mosaic to understand what to do next and next and next.
So the mosaic element of it, getting the perspective, is important for everyone to get on the same page in terms of understanding.
Yes, the reason why I pull it together is to inform, influence, and inspire. You have to inform, which means, wait a minute, why this, why now? Like, why this, why now? Influence is, well, what's in it for me? Why should I work on this, Jayshree? Why are we thinking about what is in it for me? And then the inspiration piece is what if? Like, look, if we did this, we will be able to do this. What if we did this? So it's why this, why now? What's in it for me? And the what if. That's what it's all about.
If you are enjoying this episode, I recommend you also listen to episode 88, where I spoke to Nick Parmaxizian about his role as Global CEO of DesignIt and how he believes that leaders can create environments that encourage innovation. We now have more than 140 episodes, ranging from business and sports to the arts and social change, all organised into categories on our website, which makes it easy to find them. Just hop on over to accesstoinspiration.org to discover them all. I'm sure that it's not just all been plain sailing in your career, if you're like any other leader that I've spoken to over the years. Have you ever had any moments of self-doubt? And if so, in those moments, how did you overcome them?
Oh, all the time. I mean, all the time, because that's just normal human behavior, I think. Anytime you get a role that is new or a goal that is new, I'm like, "Oh my gosh," you know? And the benefit of being the age that I am and having a tenure that I've had is that I recognize that that's what's going on in my head now. So I'm gonna have this period where I'm like, "Oh my god, I can't do it," or, "Oh my god, how am I gonna do this?" But now I know exactly how to deal with it. And I go, "Okay, what are the things that are concerning me? What can I do about them? What is it that I can't do anything about? And how strongly I feel that this is something we should be doing?" Well, I guess then the answer is clear. We're going to have to set the self doubt aside for now and get going. And I just do this action, success gives confidence. More action, more success gives more confidence. And I just know how to trigger the virtuous cycle and stop the vicious cycle from paralyzing any action. I had the same thing. I was a successful scientist. Now I'm being asked to become the chief science advocate. Exactly the same self doubt. How can I become the chief science advocate? I was not even the science type to begin with, but you work through it. And that's the main point. Everybody has self doubt. The idea is figure out why you're feeling it and what you can do to reduce that sense and then start acting. And once you start acting and doing stuff, that action gives you confidence.
Now, one of the things I've already noticed in our conversation, and I also heard it in your TEDx talk, is your use of acronyms or mnemonics, whatever one wants to call it, little things to remember something by. How did you come across that technique and what makes it work for you? And maybe just give us another example of them.
Oh, I love mnemonics and acronyms and any kind of acrostic frameworks. And I just love language and how all these things work. And it just became this powerful technique in my mind, making it memorable because it's so meaningful. And then also having a very practical and a very personal connection to it. And that's really had me inspired to come up with many, many more practical frameworks with the acronyms that make it memorable. So I'll give you one example since you asked for an example. It's about science communication. And somebody just asked me, how do you make science more relatable and how do you reach a wider audience? And I just said, you have to meet people where they're at. And you can't talk down to people. You have to understand that they're trying to understand and you're trying to make them understand. And so you have to use communication tools. And I was thinking in my head, you have to meet people where they're at. That means you need maps. And that's maps. Okay, you need metaphors and models because that's just powerful. Metaphors are figures of speech that describe one thing in terms of another. And that creates a vivid mental image. Models, they are just simplified representations of complex systems. When somebody says vaccines work because it is an army that is recognizing specific enemies, so the immune system and the pathogens, and it's just like such a wonderful tool that taps into existing knowledge but makes it more memorable. It helps you understand what is it. A in my mind was for applications and analogies. Applications are practical, real world implementations of concepts. And analogies are comparisons that highlight differences or whatever. So you can say, oh, computer memory is like a filing cabinet. Huh. It's like immediately people will recognize. So applications and analogies are so important because now you understand why I should care about the memory, right? Why I should care about this because I need that. P is for pictures and prototypes. Now, how many times do we hear just show it rather than telling it, right? Visual and tactile learning needs. When people can visually see that representation or touch or feel. At 3M, we always say, before you go meet somebody, create that touchy feely prototype. And then suddenly the meeting is a different meeting because people have a prototype. It's just allows this hands on interaction or a well designed infographic. That visual aid just reduces that cognitive load. And suddenly people are like, oh, yeah, I can see that. You're talking about climate change. You can show them a greenhouse and show the effect in the greenhouse. And people are like, now I know what it looks like. And S is for stats and stories. And here, of course, we have to appeal, as you know well, to that logic as well as emotion. So stats are giving the numerical data, but you can't stop there. Stories are the narratives that'll create that emotional connection and that contextual understanding. And stories will make the number meaningful on a human level. And that's so important. So you can talk about vaccination or you can give a personal account of a disease that somebody had or prevented or something like that. And stories will connect emotionally. So now they'll understand why does it matter. So that's how I came up with maps. So sometimes it is, oh, it's got to be maps. Or sometimes it is, I think of the elements and I go, that spells maps. And that's perfect because I'm meeting where people are at and I will need a map. So metaphors and models, analogies and applications, pictures and prototypes, stats and stories.
How wonderful. And I'm going to remember that now. You also reminded me, I used to be an IT trainer many years ago and describe a server as something like a small fridge.
There you go.
Well, of course, it's changed very much now in
Yes.
terms of size, but nonetheless, giving people a picture is such an important part, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, given that you have been in 3M for quite a number of years, as you mentioned earlier, how have you noticed the company and what it's doing in terms of keeping people empowered and focused on continual innovation?
That's a good question. I think the biggest piece is a legacy of innovation. That is so important. And I go to many meetings and conferences, and people say, wow, that's good for you that you have a legacy of innovation. How do we do it now? Because we're not 120 years old. We didn't have, McKnight giving these wonderful principles to live by, and we don't have a history and all of that. I'm like, no, whoa, whoa, whoa. The principles are very simple. You have to think about it in terms of empowerment. You have to create that expectation of people that, hey, you're here, you're innovative. That's why you're here. Once you create that expectation, people start thinking, yeah, let me think about it. How do I live up to this idea that I've got to be innovative? And we have that expectation at 3M. We have that expectation. Next thing is providing people the resources. Now you ask people to be innovative and they're going to say, well, I need like $1,000 to do this. And then I'm like, oh, well, we don't got that. Right. So you can't have that because people will say, well, they don't mean it. They're just checking the box. So that's something we do. We have entrepreneurial grants like Genesis grants, Discover grants. If you come up with an idea, you can make good on it by putting in a proposal and you get funded and you get to work on it. And there's appetite for risk. You are letting your technical people do what they think is important by creating 15% culture, right? At 3M, we can spend 15% of our time or more, to working on ideas that we think are important that may have nothing to do with our day jobs. Well, that's what makes people come together, build community. But it's a risk. Our company is willing to do that. Not everybody. It's like, what? I don't know, but that's how it happens. And it's not like everybody uses that time. And some of us live in that time. It's the concept of feeling empowered and understanding that people care. And so that leads me to giving opportunity. We give people opportunity. You give them these grants, you give them the opportunity to connect it up to a new product introduction process and connect it to making a actual product. And so that creates opportunity for you, for the team, for the company. And then rewards and recognition. So you are rewarded. Oh my gosh, look, Jayshree got another Genesis grant. And maybe we apply for the golden acorn. And so it's like rewards and recognition that our CTO and CEO come by. They look at all these posters where we talk about all the new ideas we've had. And then constant socialization of the concept of being innovative. That is also extremely important. And the nuances change. And over the years, leadership changes, beliefs change. But we have such a strong legacy of continuing on with these things that I tell people if you don't do it, you're making errors. And it's the reason why I say that is because this whole thing was an acronym. You knew it. E is for expectation that we create. R is for risk taking. R is for resources. O is for opportunity. R is for rewards and recognition. And S is for constant socialization of the concept. And that's what it's all about because people will make errors too. And you have to have an appetite for risk and of accepting failure because that's just the normal course of how things work.
I think that's a really important point you've made there about accepting failure and back to belief and mindset. Now, of course, technology these days is really advancing and AI, artificial intelligence, is all talk at the moment. How does AI influence innovation?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like you said, it's just taken over the airwaves right now. But I like to say what we're currently witnessing is not the rise of genuine artificial intelligence. I think it is the proliferation of what I call artificial diligence.
That's interesting. Tell me more.
Because I'm talking about the consistent effort by AI in performing assigned tasks. Humans get tired, fatigued, distracted, but AI systems can work tirelessly, unwavering focus. So it's great to have a team member like that who doesn't get tired, doesn't complain, and happy to do the same task over and over again. That is artificial diligence. And I call it artificial because real diligence is the human capacity for sustained perseverance and dedication, which is driven by our intrinsic motivation, our personal values, our own sense of purpose. That is real diligence. What these tools are artificial diligence doing what we ask them to do. And by the same token, if artificial intelligence refers to this human intelligence by machines, then real intelligence is the capacity of human beings to acquire and apply knowledge and skills. So, bottom line to me, the key to innovation is to effectively harness whatever it is that this artificial intelligence is, but it lies in human intelligence and human diligence. And so that's what we've got to do. We have to find the tools and the problems to solve where when they come together, we really improve human intelligence and diligence.
So it's a partnership, effectively.
It's a partnership. And I've written about this. It's going to come out in a book written by one of your guests. And that's how we connected, is through Faisal Haq's book, Transcend. And he was kind enough to ask me to write about this. And that's where I shared this concept and it resonated with him too. It's like, that's right. It is artificial diligence. It's like doing the same thing over and over again without complaining.
It's an interesting perspective to consider AI in that particular way, Jayshree. Now, given we are the Access to Inspiration podcast, who or what inspires you?
I am driven by the opportunity to develop skills, nurture talent, build expertise, and cultivate mindset. And no surprise, that's the real STEM: skills, talent, expertise, mindset. That is what truly inspires me. And what also inspires me is the idea that from a scientist in the trenches driving innovation, if I really put my heart and mind to it, I was able to build a innovation thought leadership platform. So much so that I was able to collaborate with the likes of Professor Amy Edmondson and Professor Rita McGrath, bring some of my practical frameworks to life. And I was recently acknowledged in the Thinkers50 Radar list. And that's truly inspirational that if you set your mind to something, you can do it. So, what is it that I can do with my unique point of view? And what more can I do? And so that's what really inspires me, that the real diligence, I suppose, of the human abilities.
And so how would you measure your success when you go home at night and you're putting up your feet and you're making your dinner or whatever you're doing? How do you evaluate and measure your success?
Well, I like to think about it holistically. My KPIs are: do I have knowledge or know how or research that I can authentically own? Do I have a point of view that merits attention or a vantage point that makes something insightful? Do I take initiative to inform, influence, inspire, and have impact? And am I sharing and socializing? Simply putting myself out there. And if I'm doing all those, I think I've done all right.
So finally, step into the shoes of your daughter when she's older and looking at mum and thinking about what impact she's had on the world. What would you hope is your legacy in years to come?
It's funny how your kids are your worst critics, but they also make you really think. And I'm very grateful for my kids who show me the mirror all the time. I think there are three aspects, and I talk a lot about them in my books. There's footprints, fingerprints, and imprints. And footprints mark the path we tread. So it's kind of like the milestones and those kinds of things. Fingerprints symbolize the work we do, it's the work, the results. And imprints to me is the indelible impact we can have on hearts and minds of others. And that to me is what I would like for people to think about. What did she do? How did she do it is important as well. And my books to me are part of that legacy. I wanted to be productive with purpose. So I decided to take my essays, partner up with the Society of Women Engineers, and put a book out, and all proceeds go to a scholarship for women in STEM. So the first book laid the foundation. And then I got to meet the first scholar, and it was just a life-changing moment. And I was like, my gosh, I can't stop here. Look what we made happen. And so I wrote the second book. It's called Engineering Fine Print. And that takes us deeper into feelings, identities, needs, experiences, and using that as a catalyst for action and self realization. And what I really think is going to be a big piece of the legacy, I know it's a long answer, is my third book. Because in this book, we take all the insights and strategies from the first two as well and then put them into practice. So it's 40 frameworks broken up, hands on guide, suggested reflections, actions, and you can construct a personalized blueprint for your success step by step. And I really hope the mental models and frameworks in there resonate for people to create a tangible blueprint for their legacy by developing their skills and nurturing their talent and building their expertise and cultivating their mindset. And that's what I want my legacy to be. And I hope my kids see that's what I wanted to take everything that I've experienced, thought about, and put it out there so people can learn from it and improve upon it.
Well, it's been wonderful to get your perspective today, Jayshree. The legacy you've left with me is remembering all of those mnemonics that you've described to us. So that's been really insightful. If people do want to find out more about the work that you do and your books and so on, how can they find those things?
Well, follow me on LinkedIn. I am there almost every day, to the enormous embarrassment of my kids. But since I have that many followers, they know that that's the way to be out there is try, and then find your community. So follow me on LinkedIn. I'd be really happy if you can order the books. They're all available on Amazon. And like I said, it's not just what you take away from this, it's also what you give back. And that is the gift of education, which is the best gift you can ever give.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you well in the future.
Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what Jayshree had to say and that you're reflecting on how you innovate and maybe thinking of some of those acronyms that she used too. Well, whilst this podcast is free to listen to, it's not free to make. And if you'd like to pay it forward and support our not-for-profit podcast, then take a moment to click on the Buy Me a Coffee link on the show notes to make a small donation. And that way we can enjoy a cup of coffee when producing our next episode. Your support really encourages us to continue producing quality audio content for our listeners. I'll be back again in 2 weeks and speaking to Anil Damla, who took a road trip across the entire continent of South America. I hope you can join us then.